Usually I'm not really looking to get super intricate with my tweaking on stuff. I kind of am just looking for sounds that are inspiring right away that I can edit the very basics of and then quickly start making music. Hi, my name is Lido. I'm from Norway, but I live in LA now and I make music. I've worked with a bunch of really talented people like Earth Gang, Jaden Smith, Chance the Rapper, Jordan Ward. My first actual big cut in the US was a Ariana Grande song called Be My Baby. It just kind of legitimized me as a producer in a lot of ways. So today I wanted to show you guys a few different ways that I use native instrument plugins in my music. The song just came out. It's called Okay With Me by Amine, which I produced, and the whole thing is based around beatbox loop that I made, and then we used Battery to mess around with a bunch of different drum samples to layer that beatbox. So this is a voice memo of just writing the first idea on the piano. That's the pocket that I wanted. So then I looped the good parts of that. And then I pitched it down an octave. Turn it to a bass. Put some claps on top of that. At this point, I had the idea of taking a bunch of different drum samples that sounded like they were from completely different songs and making a groove out of that. Battery was really helpful with that. It's very rare for me to be using kits, but I love putting my own samples into Battery. And it's so easy to just literally drag them in and then you immediately have access to it. So I have a bunch of different samples lined up. All different sounds, and then I filtered it quite a bit, added some reverb to it. This one as well. This was a much spicier clap, and then I filtered it down a little bit. Same here, I cut all the highs with the filter. And on this one, I wanted more snap out of this sample, so I used the Transient Master to get the attack up and calm down the sustain a little bit. So it used to sound like that. I was looking for more like that. And then this is also cool, this open hat sample, which I just duplicated twice and pitched down the second time right here. The first one is down 2 steps. Second is down 6 steps, and I could just do it literally while we were jamming. I love having drum sounds on a keyboard and being able to physically record stuff and physically jam. So that's usually how things will come about in the first place. What I love about Battery is the ability to have multiple drum samples that I can tweak individually across a keyboard and still keep jamming. Very often, if say in this case, for example, I have the main part of this groove is the 2 hi-hats. So I'll put those separately from everything else and have the main sounds down here. So that I know that, up here, there's something happening. But most of the time, we're so deep in it at this point that there's not really much of a recipe, to be honest. I like taking sounds from loops that I'll get from my friends or things that I've made in other projects and stuff like that, then resample those and take pieces of it. So in this case, for example, a drum machine thing, and we just took and this snare is even from the same thing. A different part of the same loop. So a lot of times, if I want something really snappy and quick, I'll literally just do that right in Battery. Before all the Battery stuff, very acoustic sounding thing, and then with all these different drum sounds. we basically just took that, put a little bass line on it, little chords, and that's pretty much the whole song. I think probably the first stuff that people recognized outside of Norway was like some remixes that I started putting up on SoundCloud. They were all bootleg remixes in the beginning. I made all that music before I really understood any of the rules, which makes it really fun to go back to now because they're just this big mashup of gospel music, but also rap music, but also pop music, R&B music. Like, it was kind of just everything that I loved at the same time. I've tried to keep that same philosophy now with making music after I've started to understand some of the rules. So this is a remix that I did for Banks, a really cool track called Drowning that I made back in 2014. It was one of the first like official remixes that I did. So I had all the stems, I had a clean acapella, and I could just write new music around that, which is basically what I did. The very, very first thing that I put into the remix is also the first thing you hear, which is this pizzicato pattern. So this pizzicato sound is the solo strings sound in Kontact's Factory Library in the orchestral section. Like a sustained thing, and then I just scroll down here, and it was super inspiring, and I ran with it. So apart from that, I used a bunch of different massive sounds on top of each other. Whoa! Huge fan of like the big like saw sound. I was learning massive at the time and kind of was just like tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it, and came up with this in the end. And something that I do a lot is I'll layer like very similar synth things on top of themselves with different synths. So say like this one, for example, then I have another piece right here that does the same rhythm, but just the one note. Just kind of makes the whole thing feel more aggressive when they're together. Second sound is literally just a preset in Massive called A Love Lead that I thought was really fire. I'm also in this one using a piano sound from Kontakt. So it's pretty much the exact same chords as the main synth, and all together sounds nice and big. I think the main thing that I've learned about people who make music is that we very often forget to listen to music. One of my mom's favorite quotes, she says, input equals output. If you want to make music, you have to listen to music. You have to put stuff into your brain so other things can come out. So very often I'll make little pieces of music that are like really precious to me and that I like inspire me somehow, but that I can never find like a proper home for. And they usually go into a folder of things that I then will resample later on and kind of like repurpose into new things. So say I wrote this sad little interlude song and pitched it up so it sounded like this. I just used that as the raw material for this track. So I chopped up this moment over here. That was the first part that turned into. I love getting like physical with the music, like actually chopping it up and shuffling it around. You get a lot of cool accidents because that way you kind of like bypass the muscle memory of like a lot of things that you automatically do on a keyboard and stuff like that. I've started a lot of ideas in Retro Machine. That's like one of the pieces in Kontakt that I think is like really, really fun and got like a lot of cool sounds in it. One sound that like a lot of people has asked me about is like the lead synth sound in one of my songs called Murder. And it's actually based off of a preset in Retro Machines. I was using Retro Machines a lot at the time. It's literally based off a preset called Jaco Bass. Sounds like this. I think I just started out with the bass line. This is the preset, just literally exactly how it exists in the library. So then I was just messing with these knobs right here. Made it a little wider. I believe found like a resonance here that I like. Also, yeah, I turned up the mod wheel quite a bit. There it is. I love the way that this patch sounded, but it was a little bit straightforward. I want it to be weirder and more wobbly, so I added a compressor just to tame it a little bit. And then a chorus. And then a couple like widening plugins just to kind of like make it weirder and boxier. And then there's an OTT on top. And then also some pretty dramatic EQ stuff going on in here too. I think I really just like the presets in Retro Machines a lot. And it's quite intuitive in terms of like the controls that are here. And Retro Machines has some really good sounding stuff. It's easy to do the things with it that I usually like to do. Like I'll mess with the cutoff, I'll mess with the attack, the release, the ability to widen it a little bit and mess with the glide and stuff. I love. I'm surprised that I didn't use the glide on this one, because that would have turned into some pretty cool stuff. You know, when you're making music with somebody and there's an artist behind you being like, yo, let me record this verse. And I'm like, no, wait until I get this sound right. I just got to load up all these plugins that take forever. Sometimes it's nice to just be able to like, and then just make music. When I started out, I always thought that a producer was more like an instrumentalist. And I didn't realize until I, came here and started working, every day with other people, that my main job is just to make other people make great songs. The absolute best thing is when you leave at the end of the day with a beautiful song. Kind of like no matter how you got there, that's the goal.